Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters and viewers of Iqra TV. Welcome to the first edition of Real Talk after the holy month of Ramadan. I hope you all had a wonderful, peaceful, spiritually uplifting Ramadan this past month that has just gone. I hope you all had a wonderful Eid. This last Eid obviously has been difficult for many families since the last time because of this COVID pandemic that all of us, by greater or lesser extent, have suffered, and there are many families who are remembering those very close loved ones that they may have lost as well. And so it has not been a time of real celebrations for many. But to actually make it even worse, we saw some dramatic, disturbing scenes of what was happening in Masjid al-Aqsa, in the occupied territories, in Gaza, in West Bank, etc., that really hurt all the peace-loving Muslims around the world. And today's program is to discuss issues around Palestine and what has happened and what we've witnessed on our screens. We've seen people dying, especially children being killed on a daily basis. The attack on Masjid al-Aqsa, I think, upset every Muslim, any sane person, whether you're a Muslim or not, to attack a place of worship where people are actually worshipping, attack them with rubber bullets, live bullets allegedly, as well as gas, is one of the most heinous crimes ever been committed to people who are in prayer. And that is what I want to talk to you about. And I have some real special guests today with me. And I have somebody joining us hopefully very soon from actually Jerusalem. I thought it was going to be Gaza, Dr. Abi Zayyad, who is a doctor, archaeologist who's worked very closely and is on the advisory board of Masjid al-Aqsa as well. But I also will have, later on in the program, the chair of Friends of Al-Aqsa, who have been organizing demonstrations across the country since this attack on the Muslim people. Not just the Muslim people, the Christians are also suffering to a greater or lesser extent in the occupied parts of East Jerusalem as well, and Hebron. But it's the majority of people who are suffering at this moment in time from this vicious attack, what I have called it, so I might as well say it as well, that some people have described state-sponsored terrorism that is taking place in Israel at this moment in time. So we'll be talking to my two guests who are with me, and I'm really pleased that they are here today. One I've not met for a very long time, and the other I'm meeting for the first time, Sister Safina Akhtar, who's from Huddersfield, and Shamsuddin Ahmad, who's from Bradford. Shamsuddin I've met many years ago for the first time, and I'm meeting him again after a long while, as I say. Both of them have been very active in the campaign to try and get social justice and equality and full human rights for the people of Palestine. I'm sure everybody sitting at home will have been touched by what has happened. Nobody can be sort of sit back and be immune to the images of dead children that died. The latest figures that I've got at the moment is, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, 200 people have died in total so far. Over 50 to 60 children have been the victims of death by these brutal sort of bombings that are taking place. Buildings have been demolished. People have been made homeless, within 5 minutes of a warnings being given. And this is a tragedy of the highest proportion. And it looks like that those who are the victims of a Holocaust are now perpetrating another tragedy on another community. So, it seems that no lessons have been learned from historical sort of evidence and tragedies that took place. So I'm hoping that very soon I'll have Sister Abi Zayyad from Jerusalem, as I say, who's a member of the advisory board of Masjid al-Aqsa, who will give us the most up-to-date information as to what is happening at this moment in time. The worst thing that is happening, I suppose, for me, and I'm sure many of you, is that it seems that after 3 or 4 days, this seems to have completely disappeared off the agenda of the main news organizations in this country. Today, before I came here, I was looking at BBC on CFAX, and there's not a single mention of what has happened today in Gaza or in occupied territories, etc. Now, lots of people have attended lots of demonstrations, lots of people have expressed their concerns, their disgust as to what is going on, but also we have to remember that not all Jews are opposing sort of the occupation. There are some Jews who do not believe that Israel should have a state or Jewish people should have a state. It's the Zionists in the Jewish community who are perpetrating many people have described is another crime on humanity, and that they need to be made accountable for this. So let me just turn to my two guests before Sister Abir Zayad joins us, and then later on Brother Ismail Patel, the chair of Friends of Aqsa. Can I start with Sister Safina Akhtar? I mean, welcome. You've not come far. You've come from Huddersfield.
Yeah, no, not
You're a volunteer with Friends of Aqsa.
Yeah.
I mean, when you started seeing these images, the news started coming out, I mean, it must have really hit you hard, like it hit everybody else as well.
Yeah, of course it was. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see those images. As a mum, I've got 4 children, ages 8 to 2, and when you're seeing young children, being pulled out of the rubble and seeing bodies just lying there wrapped, it's really heartbreaking. And I'm glad that I can sort of be part of this conversation, and later on we will discuss what we can do. I think it's so important to not feel that we are helpless. We can we need to do our part.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I want to do this program today. I mean, people may feel that there's nothing they can do, that it's all political, it's all politics, but I think there are things that we can do. And anybody who heard my speech in Dewsbury or in Rochdale the other day, I sort of set out some of the things that we as a community can do to try and help the people of Palestine. But I mean, we'll come back to that. Brother Samshuddin, you've been an activist with Friends of Aqsa as well, and you have been one of the stalwarts of this campaign as well, in the previous past as well. I mean, obviously, you must have really, like Sister Shafina, must have felt really down, desperate to try and help in any way we can. I mean, how did you feel when you saw this happening on our screens and the newspapers, etc.?
First of all, Jazakallah for having us here. Let me go back to the first point that you raised earlier, which was about the role of the media and the lack of the exposure from the media. One of the reasons why this atrocity is being perpetrated today is purely because of the complicity of the media. When you talk about media, let's take it another step back. We talk about language. We talk about conflict. We talk about war. Well, this kind of language denotes a very simple parameter, and that is there is something going on between two parties that have some degree of equilibrium.
Yep.
Well, hang on.
Yeah.
What air force does the Palestinian have?
Exactly, yes.
What kind of ground forces do they have? If we're going to talk about conflict, we're talking about people
but I mean,
of entities.
This is why I said, obviously, the reason why some people describe it as state-sponsored terrorism is that Israel were evicting people who had a legitimate right to be where they were. And this is an illegal eviction that is taking place. Yeah. So when people are resisting the illegal eviction, they then sort of turn that into an attack on Israel, right? So they turn the tables.
This is one of the biggest weapon that is used by the system in place, that any criticism is going to be viewed in a certain way that draws kind of shakes up people. Oh, I don't want to be going down there. It's a little difficult. I don't want to be antagonizing people. But coming to your point, how does that make you feel? Like Sister Safina said here, we're all people with families, loved ones. Can we for a moment imagine that those kind of atrocities are being perpetrated on our loved ones, and how would we be affected by that?
Yeah.
What kind of, to what depth does any sense of humanity have to sink in order to perpetrate the kind of things that we're seeing, sadly, in alternative media as opposed to the real media? So that's why platforms such as this is a brilliant opportunity to actually raise awareness of people that really it is a one-sided game. You're talking about stones and stick versus the most highly developed 21st century weaponry and technology to cause harm to humanity. That's the kind of disparities that we're
totally
looking at.
It's like somebody described David and Goliath.
Couldn't get a better example.
Yeah, David and Goliath, this is the battle of David and Goliath. It's totally unequal. and the people who have the power of suppressing, oppressing the people who, you know, who don't have the ability to fight back except, you know, with their bodies and their hands and etc. So I mean, as a mother, you know, you sit at home and watch these images in a TV. I mean, how does that? So how do you reconcile that when your children are watching it as well? You know, how do you try to explain to them? You know, what I mean. You said 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Remind me, they're quite young at the moment.
Yeah, they are quite young. In all honesty, I've not given them too much information, just because I think they're still very young, and it's a very
quite young. Yes.
It's like as an adult, it's such a hard topic to deal with, and you know, like even now when I'm talking about it, you're holding back tears. You know, it's raw emotion because you know, seeing what's happening and seeing how it's portrayed in the media, and how when something like, for example, the marches, there was, I believe in London, there was approximately 150,000 people marching, but there was a group, a small, I think there was a couple of them, unfortunately, they came down and they said some really, you know, really wrong things, and then unfortunately that made it to the that made it to the headlines.
I mean, as I said to you before we started, I mean, obviously there were lots of genuine people who made a genuine effort to try and raise awareness, but you know, and I would condemn those people who went in their cars and who made those derogatory, sexist, misogynist comments about the Jewish community, racist, you know, anti-Semitic comments. This channel will never accept anybody doing that, and we would totally and utterly condemn them, because they are not the friends of Palestinians. If they think that they are supporting people in Palestine, actually you are actually make it even worse for them by your actions. So if any one of you knows who this person is, then they need to be brought to the attention of the police service, because they need to be arrested and charged, because it's people like that who actually make it even worse for the people in Palestine, because then it draws the attention away from the genuine cause of the Palestinian people to what they were doing in London the other day. So I hope that that message goes out very clearly, that this channel would never in a million years support the actions of people like that and others who do things like that in the name of Palestine, because they're actually not doing it in the name of Palestine at all. They're actually harming the people of Palestine. So I mean, yeah, I mean, you're quite right. It must. I mean, I got to the stage where I can't even watch the TVs now. You know, when you see all this, you know, the demolition of buildings, like you say, babies being pulled out of rubble, etc. I saw one little girl being pulled out yesterday, you know, out of rubble. I mean, as a mother, as a father, I mean, this is dreadful scenes that we're seeing. I mean, the community, we have a very large Muslim community in this country.
We do.
Right? So, I mean, I have 3 things that I said to people the other day, both in Dewsbury and in Rochdale, and that is, we are not helpless. You know, we can do something. And I know that's what you're going to be talking about. So rather than me telling people, you know, let's come back to you two. I mean, you're activists more so than I am, you know, and you've been working as an activist for a while, you know, as you say, and you, sir, as well, Brother Shamsuddin. I mean, what do we expect our government to do first? What would you like to see our government to do first?
I think, so firstly, you know, to hit where it hurts, sanctions. I think we're past the point of condemnation. That, you know, that was decades ago.
They have not even really done that, have they?
Yeah, no.
I mean, the initial reaction by Dominic Raab was, you know, we want to see a de-escalation of the situation in Israel.
Yeah.
Right? And then when Israel threw all those sort of missiles, etc., on Gaza, etc., you know, there was hardly any comments. And as soon as Hamas started firing rockets, you know, they started attacking Hamas, saying that, you know, obviously Israel needs to defend itself. But what about the people of Israel? Coming back to your point, Brother Shamsuddin, you know, they've got sticks and stones. You know, then they're facing the most sophisticated, the state-of-the-art technological weapons. Right. So yeah, I know. So sorry, carry on with that.
Yeah, so I was just saying, with in terms of the government, I'd say sanctions straight up, because obviously if they can't fund what they're doing, then it's game over, isn't it? And I think in terms of what.
So when you say sanctions, what do you actually mean by that?
I mean that as in, you know, stop trade with them and stop supporting, stop funding them, and you know, if certain companies that are based in Israel that have, you know, got investments here, they need to cut off from that.
Right. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think I want to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say I did what I could.
Right.
So and I think you have to be hopeful, because as Muslims we always have hope.
Inshallah, yes.
Yeah. So I think there was a story actually I read the other day, and it was about the Prophet Ibrahim, and they were thrown into the fire, and obviously it was a very big fire. We all know about that. We've all been taught that story as kids. And there was a little bird, and this little bird, it collected some water in its beak, and it started throwing it on this huge fire, and all the other birds were laughing. And this the little bird sort of said back that, look, I want to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say I tried, I did my bit.
Yes.
So yeah, maybe obviously there's lots of investments and things like that. To be honest, I'm not brilliant with politics. Yeah, there are all these investments, but at the end of the day we've got to have hope, and we've got to try, and we've got to do our bit.
Okay. Brother Shamsuddin,
you know what, Sister Safina's actually hit it on the head. Sanction, what does it actually mean? Governments do not change policies because they're sympathetic. They don't. Government change policies because they realize that the masses are not willing to accept the status quo. So you talked about power earlier on, Iqbal Bhai. The power doesn't lie with the government. The power actually lies with the people. And the real test is, are we capable of coming together, seeing what we're saying? And it actually cuts right across. It's got, it is not to do with the religion. It is not to do with the race, color, cultural. It is purely to do with humanity. Because there are other people of other faith that are also being persecuted on that same land. Why is it happening? There is something fundamentally wrong. And the only way it will happen, the only way changes will happen, is when the governments begin to realize that their own population are no longer willing to accept, because the threshold has now been violated, and people will no longer accept. Which is why you saw on Saturday, for example, just in one demonstration in London, you had tens of thousands of people turning up. Why? Because people have, that's an expression of their resentment that this is not acceptable in a human society in the 21st century.
And there were people from all walks of life, all faiths, all colors. There were Jewish people there as well, Christian people there, people of no faith. We've got a call coming in, so can I say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you give me your name and where you're calling from, please?
My name is Mrs. Tahir, and I'm calling from Bradford.
MashaAllah. Mrs. Tahir?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mrs.
It's
Tahir,
always about.
can I say we're going to a break very shortly. So can you make it brief, or I might ask you to come back again after the break. Camera,
okay. Shall I try after the break?
No, carry on.
It's always about speeches. It's always about the demonstration. But what's the result?
Yes.
We need to focus on result. How can we achieve the result what we want? As a Muslim, we should think that the attack is not on Masjid al-Aqsa. Is attack on our house. It's attack on our daughters. If we think like this, like one body, and we get together, and it's not only visionary personalities and speeches and all these. It's a matter of action. How we get together and take the responsibility, and what we can do to get results.
Excellent. I think that's a fantastic point, and Jazakallah, Mr. Tahir, and that is where we were leading up to. All right, the calls dropped. We were leading up to Jazakallah, Mr. Tahir. I think you focused us into a particular point that we wanted to discuss, and I'll come back to this issue about people power, because in the 70s and 80s and 90s in particular, the people power that Shamsuddin brother was talking about, Brother Shamsuddin, was actually very powerful when it came to anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. I was very active at that time, and as a result of my activation and my activism, I've had the benefit of having met Nelson Mandela 3 times in my life, which was the pinnacle of my life at some stage as well. And it showed how people power can make a difference. Now, obviously, this is a program, as Sister Tahir said, there was an attack on the third most important place of worship for Muslims, the holiest of place that we have. This is a program for you. When you get a chance, if you want to, please ring in. Don't go away. We'll be coming back soon, and I'll have, I hope, Sister Abir Zayad with me from Jerusalem, and I'll also have Brother Ismail Patel after 10 minutes or so. So I hope you have enjoyed it so far. This subject is going to go on. Inshallah, I'll see you soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.